This conference will now be recorded.
All right, hi everyone, and welcome. If you haven't been on the other couple of these that I've done each Wednesday, the format is basically I spend about 15 minutes going over a specific feature or part of the system, and then the last half we save for questions that you may have. So if you want to type in the questions as we go, and I can refer back to the chat, you can do that, or you can wait till I just open it up and you can unmute yourself and ask your questions via your voice, unmuted. Either way works for me. So today I'm going to go over kind of invoicing. I get a lot of questions from users on how to handle different situations and how to make the invoices look a certain way. So I'm going to go over all of that. So the first thing is the actual invoice templates. Now there's two different ways these are set up, and it really depends on if you are an owner who is an admin user or if you are an IC, and then also within that how your account is set up. So a lot of our agencies are set up in a way where the ICs operate under the same agency name as the owner. So there's one website, one logo, all of that. If yours is set up that way, only admins have access to edit the invoice templates, and they can do so by going to settings and system settings and company invoice settings. And then in here, they can upload their logo. They can put a footer text at the bottom, however you want. And then here you can edit the disclaimer to say whatever you'd like to say. Now, you can also set up multiple different templates if you would like. So this could be like the general one or the default one. And then you can also come down here and add additional templates. So if you had, maybe you wanted to create one for cruises and one for for land, or maybe one for like European trips. I don't know if the terms you want to have are different, based on the different suppliers or trips that you book, you could create additional templates. Now, if you do this, as soon as you have at least one more template here, anytime a user is on a trip, there's going to be a drop down here where they select which one they want to preview or generate. So if I want to do second template demo, I select that and then click preview or generate, or I just leave it as default. My experience has been, if you can, make these terms kind of generic enough to work for every situation. That way you don't have to be sure you're selecting the correct one before you preview or generate it. Now, that may not be possible in all situations, but if you can, I think that's probably the best way. Now, another group of accounts that we have operate more like a host, where each individual IC may use their host, IATA or Clear or whatever to book, but they have their own agency name and website and logos and things like that. If that is the case, the owner, there's a checkbox that the owners can set up or check in each user's settings for user sets up own invoice details. And you'll see that when you create the users. If that is checked, that particular user, when they click on settings, they will have an option for user invoice details, which will be very similar to this, but anything they change in here is just for them. So they can create their own individual invoices that maybe have a different logo or different verbiage than what their host has. So that's that. Now let's jump into kind of how to, enter trips for your invoicing purposes. So I'm going to use this trip that I just created this morning, or actually a little bit ago. It's a trip to Mexico, and I've got a package reservation that I went ahead and imported from Travel Impressions. So the dates are going to be old from last year, but the process is the same. Now, anything you do with these reservation components down here is essentially setting up the invoice for the client. So I just imported this in. I didn't do anything else. Now, if I preview this invoice, what you'll see is that everything is in the order in which it was received from Travel Impressions, or whatever supplier you imported from. So it's not necessarily in chronological order, and there's a bunch of this extra additional details or other reservation components you'll see here. So it looks kind of messy because clients don't know what this means, and You might not want this stuff on here, or these promos. If you book during a promo, especially with ALG brands, when you import it, it'll pull in this extra stuff. So I always like to clean this up a little bit. And so what you can do is you can preview if you see things you need to clean up, go back into the reservation. The first thing I like to do is reorder everything so it's kind of in chronological order, so it's just easier for the client to follow along with. Now, there's a pretty quick and easy way to do that, which is this button here. So if I click order reservation components by date, that will reorder everything by date. Now, if certain things have, the same date, it will look at, the air will be first, because typically they're going to fly to their destination and then they will have a transfer. So the transfer will be the second item. Here I would want to put in the transfer company as well. And then we scroll down, we get into the hotel and the flights back home and, things like that. Now, if there's something that still needs to be fine-tuned as far as the order goes, you can also collapse these and you can just drag and drop. Like if for some reason I wanted the transfers to be first, I could just drag them up and put them at the top, and that's where they will show up on the invoice. Now, that's not what I want to do because it was already in the correct order. But I also want to take care of those extra things that I don't want to show on the invoice. So I'm going to scroll down and find those, and I'm just going to check do not show on invoice on all this stuff. Now, I could also delete these as well if you wanted to. You could just delete them all together. However, you have to be careful with that, because in some cases, if you import a booking that was booked during a promotion, there will be something. I'll just keep checking these as I go down here. There might be something like this, like save up to $150, and it's a negative dollar amount. So that's how a lot of the suppliers get you that sale price. They put a negative dollar amount in. So, I could delete those other things, but if I was just in a hurry and I was deleting all the extra junk, if I deleted this, it would increase my cost on this booking by $150 because I removed a negative dollar amount. So that's why I just like to say do not show on invoice. And so now I'm going to save that again. And when you're first doing this, you might save 5 or 6 times, but once you get the hang of it, you'll know what it's going to look like, so you can do your changes, save one time, and then preview. So now if we look at this, you can see everything's in order. And I've hidden that extra stuff, and now we just get to the pricing and the terms and things like that. Now you can also add notes to any of this stuff. Like let's say for the transfer, if I wanted to put a note in here, like to tell the client where to find their transfer, you can always use the invoice comments for that. So go to the invoice comment that you want to load something from, and you can type in whatever you want. Same thing for the hotel. Like a lot of times it'll come in with stuff from the supplier. You could delete this out. You can put your own stuff in. You can leave it alone. It's totally up to you. Now, let's say that you booked the flights and the hotel and maybe the insurance with one supplier, but you booked your transfers separate with a different supplier. In that situation, anytime you're working with more than one booking number, you want to have those different bookings as separate reservations within the trip. So I'm going to pretend like we didn't book these through Amstar. I'm going to delete this out of here to remove it, and then I'm going to come up here and save that. But let's say I booked the transfers with Lomas. So what I would do is I would go back to the trip and I would add a new reservation. So I'd have 2 reservations here. And for this reservation, it's going to be a transfer with Lomas. And I'm going to put in my Lomas booking number. And let's just say the deposit amount is $129. And then I'll click create. So I still have to get the price in here and the commission. So let's say the commission is $30. And I'll save that. I should have done that already. But I don't have any reservation components. So I'm going to go ahead and add a transportation component. Click to add new. And then I'm going to use what I showed in a video a couple weeks ago, the reservation components templates. I'm going to add a template for Lomas private transfers and import that. And maybe I want to put in some details, like the pricing here, and I'll leave everything else kind of as is. Now, when you do this like this, what you're going to end up with, if we preview the invoice again, is you're going to have two different sections. So you're going to have the package reservation, that's with the travel impressions booking, and then the total for that. And then you're going to have the transfer reservation, the total for that, and then the trip totals are all of those added together. Now, in a lot of cases, that's probably not that big of a deal because realistically, the client's going to see those individual charges on their card anyway. They're going to see 129 goes to Lomas and whatever else goes to travel impressions, but sometimes you may not want it to show that, these individual costs. So what you can do to avoid that is you can, actually before I do that, let's talk about reordering those. So let's say I wanted the transfer to be first. So what I could do is I could go back to this client's trip, and then I can scroll down here and I can say change reservation invoice order, and I can just drag and drop. So I can put the Lomas transfers first, save order. Not sure if you have to save on the screen, but let's just do it anyway. And now if I were to preview this invoice, the transfers will be first, followed by the package. So now let's go back to what I started talking about. Let's say you want to get rid of these individual prices here for each reservation because you don't want, to supply the client with that. What you can do is you can come in here and you can check this box to hide invoice reservation totals. So if I check that and click save, and now if I were to preview that invoice, it will still show them kind of separated out. Here's the transportation, followed by, all the other stuff, but they only see the one cost at the bottom, which is the grand totals for all of that added together. Now, this is the process that most users do. Now, like I mentioned earlier, when I had the single reservation, that I like to put everything in chronological order if I can. But it gets a little bit more difficult to do that if you are piecing stuff together from several different reservations. Now, let's say I still wanted to do that. I don't want this to be separated out. I want it, in here. The way you can do that is everything else that we've done so far would be the same. I'm going to have a separate reservation. I'm going to put the pricing in there. That way I can track the commission for that individually, and I can track my sales with Lomas accurately. But what I would do is I would come in here and I would hide this component. So I've already hidden the individual reservation, so you can't see a breakdown of the pricing, but I'm also going to hide this component. I'm going to leave the pricing in there, but I'm not going to show it on the invoice. So now when I save, that price at $129 is included in the total cost, but they're not going to see it on the invoice. However, you still want to show the client that that's what you booked for them. So what you could do is you could go into your package booking, because that is the one that is showing everything. And then you could add a transportation component. And then I'll come down here and collapse these, and I'll put it up where I want it to go. I'm going to put it right before the hotel. And then I'm going to put the details in here. But in this one, I'm going to leave the price blank because I don't want that $129 to look like I sold it with travel impressions. So I could put in here something like that to tell me or anyone else within my agency that's looking at this that it's booked separately. And then I'll save that here. And now finally, if I preview this, I'm going to see everything in chronological order. But for the back end, for my sales numbers and my commission, it's all entered correctly. So I think that's a pretty good overview. I'm not going over the invoice information because I did that on the last call. So if you watch the video in the user center from last week, you will see where I talked about entering, things in here as well. Any questions anyone has on any of that? Feel free to jump in if you do have any. Happy to answer them.
I had a quick question, and maybe you already went through this in the presentation from last week, but to edit some of those invoice templates, is there a way to do that, or can we only delete them and make new ones?
Yeah, so you can't edit the existing ones. You just have to make a new one for that. So if I went in here, let's say I changed something on this, I could just click here and just save it as a new. Or if I want to delete the old one, I could click import, select the one that I don't want. So if I change something on here, I'd first delete this one, click import and delete, and then I would go in here and just save a new one and name it whatever I want. Does that make sense?
Yep, thanks.
Sure. Any other questions? No? Okay, well, thank you all for your time. I hope you have a great rest of your week. And if you do think of anything, feel free to reach out. We'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. Take care.